One of the most successful and richest entertainment executives is David Geffen. He had enormous success with his music company Asylum Records, and then after leaving Asylum in 1975, he spent a few years as vice president of Warner Brothers. That was the start of his association with Warner, who would then help fund his next music company, Geffen Records, in 1980. When he founded the Geffen Film Company, he signed a distribution deal with Warner Brothers and got to work looking for original scripts to produce. The first film produced by Geffen was the running drama Personal Best, directed by Robert Towne, although it had a difficult production. The movie went over budget, and the filming was also affected by the 1980 actors' strike. Towne would end up suing Geffen and Warner Brothers for $110 million over his contracts with both of them, feeling he'd been wronged. While Personal Best got good reviews, it struggled at the box office. Geffen's next production was the comedy Risky Business. Allowing writer Paul Brickman to make his directing debut and casting Tom Cruise in the lead role, it turned out to be one of the biggest hits of 1983 and was the movie that turned Cruise into a star. The company next picked up Albert Brooks' comedy Lost in America, which received strong reviews for its road trip hijinks and Brooks' unique comedic voice and pulled in modest numbers at the box office. Geffen then decided to release the dark comedy After Hours. Martin Scorsese chose to direct it after The Last Temptation of Christ had initially collapsed at Paramount, wanting to make something quickly and on a lower budget. That film turned out to be exactly the pick-me-up Scorsese needed, receiving solid reviews and pulling in okay grosses. A project Dave Geffen was very passionate about was the film adaptation of the off-Broadway musical Little Shop of Horrors. Geffen had produced that show and was keen on bringing it to the screen, heavily involving writer and lyricist Howard Ashman on the movie. Frank Oz was hired to direct, and it became quite an ambitious production, filming on the same stages that the James Bond movies used and putting together elaborate special effects for the Audrey II puppet. The film did run into a major issue of test screenings, as audiences hated the ending where Seymour and Audrey are killed in Eden and the plan takes over the world. While theater audiences did not have an issue with it, the moviegoers had fallen in love with these characters. So the decision was made to film a happy ending where Audrey II is defeated and the two leads survive. The test screening scores shot up, and this was the version that was released in theaters. Critics praised the movie, and while the initial box office grosses were seen as disappointing, Little Shop of Horrors became a big hit on video, quickly developing a strong following. Meanwhile, David Geffen recommended to his friend Jeffrey Katzenberg that he should bring Howard Ashman and his musical collaborator Alan Menken to Disney, resulting in animated classics like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Geffen next saw potential in a comical script about a couple who die and find themselves haunting their own house. That was Beetlejuice, which caught the attention of Tim Burton. Interesting enough, Burton had originally planned to direct After Hours, but stepped away after Scorsese expressed interest. Burton's original choice for the title role was Sammy Davis Jr., but Geffen instead passionately suggested Michael Keaton. It's interesting to think that if Geffen had not been so insistent on Keaton, audiences would have likely seen a different actor as Batman in 1989. Geffen also thought Catherine O'Hara, who had a role in After Hours, would be a good fit for Delia Dietz. Beetlejuice became a big hit, with audiences responding to Tim Burton's imaginative visuals and the antics of the ghost with the most. This is probably the movie I most associate with the company, especially the way the opening lyrics of Deo play over the logo at the beginning. The Geffen Company would also get right to work on making a Beetlejuice animated series, which ran for 4 seasons and led to David Geffen, Tim Burton, and the other producers winning a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program. Fun fact, I've actually seen that Emmy in person at the building of Chorus Entertainment, the parent company of the show's animation studio Nelvana. Heading into the 90s, Geffen sold his record company to MCA, which turned him into a billionaire. Geffen would back Paul Brickman's next directorial effort, the drama Men Don't Leave. While that film received solid reviews, Warner Brothers did not give it that big of a release, and it came and went from theaters without much fanfare. He would also reteam with Albert Brooks for his romantic comedy Defending Your Life, which was praised for its depiction of the afterlife, and while it was not initially a hit, it has developed a strong following since then. Both this film and Lost in America were even added to the Criterion Collection. The Geffen Company would then buy the script to Shane Black's action movie The Last Boy Scout for a then record amount. It's possible that even got the ball rolling for a period in the 90s when studios would pay top dollar for original spec scripts. Geffen would partner with Joel Silver to help produce the film, and Tony Scott was hired to direct. The finished film got mixed reviews, which Scott blamed on Silver, and it performed okay at the box office, although below expectations. David Geffen then set about adapting M. Butterfly, a Tony Award-winning play he had produced. David Cronenberg was chosen to direct, but the movie was one of Cronenberg's worst reviewed, and it flopped. Geffen took an interest in producing Interview with the Vampire, the adaptation of Anne Rice's novel. The rights had bounced between a few Hollywood studios before eventually landing at Warner Brothers. He had a lot of confidence in the movie, giving it a fairly sizable budget for a horror movie. Infamously, Rice initially opposed the casting of Tom Cruise as the vampire Lestat, but changed her tune after seeing the film. Geffen's good feeling about Interview with the Vampire proved correct, as it became a big hit. The film's director, Neil Jordan, would also direct the historical drama Michael Collins for Geffen, and while it got very good reviews, it was a box office disappointment and not quite the top Oscar contender it was expected to be. In 1993, Geffen signed a deal with MTV to produce movies for them as the music cable network attempted to expand into feature films. The first movie that came out of this deal was Joe's Apartment, which was based on a short film that aired on MTV. The most notable thing about this film would turn out to be the involvement of Blue Sky Studios, which provided the effects for the cockroaches that infest the apartment. While the film was panned by critics and a box office flop, those sequences caught the attention of 20th Century Fox, who were impressed with what Blue Sky pulled off and eventually acquired the animation studio. The production David Geffen was most keen on making for MTV was a Beavis and Butthead movie. He saw the show when it premiered and was an instant fan. He called up the head of MTV to set up a deal to bring the series to the big screen. Geffen's idea was to do it as a live-action film, but Mike Judge was less enthusiastic and eventually convinced Geffen to produce an animated film instead. The initial plan was also to release it through Warner Brothers like Joe's Apartment. However, after MTV's parent company Viacom bought Paramount, they wanted to release it through that studio. A deal was eventually made for Paramount to handle distribution duties, and Beavis and Butthead Do America became a critical and commercial hit. That was not the only 90s television phenomenon Geffen wanted to turn into a movie. He made a deal with the creators of the preschool show Barney and Friends for a movie about that chipper dinosaur. However, the movie struggled to get out of development, as the creators and Warner Brothers could not agree on the right approach. Geffen then helped them take the film to Polygram, and while he did not have any other involvement with Barney's Great Adventure, he nonetheless received a special thanks in the credits. While these last few films were being worked on, Geffen decided to team up with Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg to start DreamWorks Pictures in 1994, with Geffen primarily tasked with running the music division. With these new duties keeping him busy, he decided to stop producing movies through the Geffen Company, with Warner Brothers retaining the rights to the movies they distributed. Thus, the last film his company produced was Neil Jordan's dark Irish comedy, The Butcher Boy. It received solid reviews, and while it did not get much attention in North America, the movie performed quite well in Ireland. However, David Geffen would still retain some say over the movies he produced for Warner Brothers. When Little Shop of Horrors was first released on DVD in 1998, Geffen immediately told WB to remove it from store shelves, turning it into quite the rare collector's item. When Warner Brothers went through their vaults in search of bonus features to be included on the DVD, they found the original deleted ending and threw it on there. What Geffen objected to was that it was a black and white print that was in very rough shape, and he told WB that he had a much better color version of the ending in his possession. So for a long time, fans of the movie had to contend with a DVD without the ending, unless they wanted to pay high prices on eBay for a recalled edition. Finally, in 2012, the movie was released on Blu-ray, with a restored version of the deleted ending the way Geffen and Frank Oz intended for it to be seen. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers also retained the film rights to Dreamgirls, the popular stage musical that David Geffen was one of the producers on, and which he intended to turn into a movie through his company. WB gave it a try for a while, but remained stuck in development hell. Bill Condon showed interest in directing Dreamgirls, eventually enlisting Geffen's help. DreamWorks Pictures was brought in to produce the film, although Warner Brothers balked with the proposed budget, and Paramount came in to take that place even before they bought DreamWorks. While Geffen did not take a producing credit on Dreamgirls, that essentially became his film industry swan song. He would leave DreamWorks in 2008, and since then is largely focused on philanthropy, collecting art, and taking care of his expensive yachts. However, a lot of people, myself included, were caught by surprise seeing the Geffen Company logo at the start of the recent sequel, Beetlejuice. While David Geffen was involved in discussions in the 90s about the proposed unproduced sequel, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, he reportedly had nothing to do with this new movie. However, as the person who helped get the first movie made and trusted in Tim Burton's creative instincts, I can see why they want to pay tribute to Geffen by placing this credit at the start. Or maybe the original contract stipulated they had to give the Geffen Company a credit even with it long being defunct. Whatever the reason, it was still neat seeing the logo on the big screen in front of Beetlejuice. While it did not produce too many movies, Geffen nonetheless backed and supported plenty of memorable ones, many of which would become cult favorites. See you next time.